Welcome, everyone. It's Will Wilkinson here in Maui for Thriving Leadership Academy.
And I'm Christopher Harding, not in Maui, also with the Thriving Leadership Academy.
You're the guy in the snow.
I'm the guy who was digging his car out today, yes. And wonderfully, we have a guest to join us on this first episode of the new season of our Thriving podcast. A wonderful friend for both Will and I, and tremendously talented Pauline Ploquin. And she is the president of Struck, digital agency. She's also one of the people who was really helped put together the Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City a few decades back that was hugely successful. And Pauline, before we went on live here, we were talking about your educational background with a poli-sci major at Sorbonne. And you were describing why you chose poli-sci, which I thought was a great description to start this off with.
Oh, well, thank you both. It's good to be here with you, two of my favorite people in the world. And yes, fun to go back in time and talk about stories and think about why did I go into poli-sci. And I was sharing that it was really a product of not being able or not wanting to choose between various topics. And poli-sci was the one that seemed to be the broadest and allowed me to dive deeper into all of the things I love: psychology, sociology, economy, history, literature, and really understanding people and understanding culture and the forces that shape them. And that is how I ended up essentially choosing the option that allowed me not to choose.
The option not to choose.
It's fascinating looking back for all of us. And I'd love you to say a word, if you can, about how your choice not to choose, in a way, led you and contributed to what you're doing in your life today. Our focus on this program is stories. Your story back then was I don't really know yet, which resulted in a decision. But now it sounds like that was a very good choice.
Yeah, it really is interesting because I hear of stories of people who know exactly what they want to do really early on. They're passionate about it. They keep on going after it. They have this plan. And for me, it's always been an I don't know, and seeing these things present themselves to me and going, okay, that I do like, that I want to follow. So it's more of an opportunistic path of seeing the opportunity and choosing the opportunity rather than really kind of having this very clear sense of what I wanted to do. And this allowed me to essentially, after poli-sci, kind of think about what's next. And I had a friend who was in LA going to UCLA, and I saw they had a program on journalism. And I thought I was really interested in storytelling and writing. That was the other thing I was thinking about with poli-sci, like, could I be a journalist? So I jumped into that. And then the next opportunity was a job in publishing. And then the next opportunity was the Olympics. And then the next opportunity. So it was like not knowing what it was that I wanted to do. It allowed me to see the thing that was interesting to me in that moment. So It's an unconventional path.
Well, but one, like Will said, that's I think has served you well. As you were describing that, and the journalism degree I know you got from UCLA, and the emphasis on stories. What's interesting is, when you have a profession, and even now what you're creating for your clients, you're shaping stories about their business. It's easy to shape stories in a way that's outside of us. But I'm curious, at what point did you maybe start to realize that you were also generating stories about what's possible for you and what could be next in your life?
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, right? Because in the end, I think we're always generating stories, but we're not always conscious of them.
Right.
I think the story I had back then, if I had to recreate it, was I had this global background. My parents had traveled, and I was like, I want to do something that will allow me to travel and get to know other cultures. So that's the story that led me to these choices in the end. But they were very unconscious. I think there was a consciousness of that. This is my life path, but I didn't realize how much they were going to shape my choices. I think I'm a lot more aware of the power of stories, conscious and unconscious, and I'm a lot more aware of the way they open up to this unlimited potential, or they can also completely limit you and kind of actually put you in a corner and allow you to not make the right choices or not reach for your potential. So I really see it going both ways. It can be opening or limiting.
Yeah. Well, one of our hurdles in introducing the topic of stories is to help people see that it isn't kind of a sideline, stories around the campfire, watching a movie, reading a book, that we're living stories. Our lives are stories. So I'm curious with you, in your experience, because you're a professional storyteller in marketing, that's what you're doing, about the intersection between stories that are just rolling along with stories that you craft, where you get conscious and say, well, this is how I'd like this story to end. I mean, that would be true in a business setting. We have goals. So can you talk about the two and how they relate together? Just going with the flow, seeing what shows up, and then getting conscious and mapping it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly in my profession as a marketer, that's all we do. We invite our clients to be conscious about the stories they need to tell to really connect with their audience and their customers. And we have a very specific path to do it. And it is definitely one of those pieces that is very difficult to do for yourself. So this will be self-serving, but we definitely encourage bringing on a consultant to help you with your story, with your visioning and your story, because I call it's like doing heart surgery on yourself. It's like, really kind of, how are you going to do that? How are you going to open your heart yourself and look into it? So we have a specific process with this, and it's very simple. I think the brain has a hard time, comprehending complexity. So that's why we encourage them to go simple. And that's the hardest part. Actually, you have to make decisions and simplify it. And the process is very simple itself. So we start with the 3 attributes of a brand. What are the things that are unique and special about them? And it's only 3. And the combination of those 3 things are unique to them, but each of those items might not be unique in and of themselves. Mm-hmm. And then we map that back to how does that fulfill a specific emotional need of your audience or your reader or your customer. And then that gets us to that core story, that kind of initial story that really says what's unique about you and how you're fulfilling those needs for your customers. So I have examples of how we've done that. But like I said, the hardest part about being conscious is you have to make decisions to let certain part of the story not be told, and let go of being all things to all people.
Yeah, boy, that's a good reminder for everyday life, isn't it? And as Will was talking about the business aspect of it, you've been a leader for some time. You were COO, you were Chief Relationship Officer, now you're president of the organization. How do you see that whole sense of the story of our company, the story of our culture? How do you influence people to be able to be acting out the same story together in a company?
Yeah, obviously the story has to be compelling, but it has to be authentic. It has to have that ring of, yes, that is what's unique about us. And that really ignites the heart. It like kind of get people to go and recognize, yes, this is our story. I feel good about it. And there's something kind of intangible of recognition, whether you're an employee of that company or a customer of that company, you feel this kind of aha moment, and that really ignites the whole team, everybody. When we did this for Snowbird, we had a campaign that was pretty edgy, and essentially we were saying, hey, you're a difficult resort, your mountain is difficult. Stop trying to pretend like you're a family resort. And so we published negative reviews of the resort. Now that was pretty edgy, right? But that was about zeroing in on what's unique. Their unique story is too much snow, vertical drops, those kind of things. Yeah. And it ignited their team and their customers like nothing else, because it was this, yes, this is the truth. The truth is being spoken here. It feels good.
That's so great. I actually remember that campaign, and it was carving them out as a unique ski resort within the 5 or 6 that people had the choice of in that area. And it was clearly, if you want a challenging run, if you want to come up here and really have your talent challenged, come to Snowbird.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, and it addresses the limiting concept a lot of people have, that they have to appeal to everybody. Our story needs to be one that everybody's going to enjoy. No, it needs to be riveting to the target audience.
Yeah.
Well,
and also unique. Yeah, authentic and unique to you, right? That's what attracts us to the stories, right? It's like, oh, Christopher has only one story, like it's his story, and I want to hear it. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, you tapped on what I was going to ask you, and that was you used the word authenticity and authentic in both of those stories. So, for you in your role, and you've been in multiple organizations, so you have good perspective on this. What is that thing that happens when a leader is inauthentically living out the culture or the story of the organization? And how do you as a leader really become authentic in terms of living out the organization's story?
Yeah, I mean, it all manifests in the organization. And often, I talked about heart surgery for branding and brand storytelling, but the other analogy I use is therapy. Like we come in and we interview, the employees of the organization and the customer of the organization, because it's not what we say that the culture should be, or what we say the brand story should be. It's what they tell us, right? That's how we get to the core attributes, right? And so we use it really as that third-party voice to mirror back to the leader and the leadership. Here's what we heard. And so there is a disconnect, right, between the story you're saying is the true story and how they're receiving it. And when there's a disconnect, that gap, right, is when there's something is off, something is not aligned. Maybe it's not the right story. Maybe it's not being lived. The behaviors, as you said, Chris, are not aligned with the story. It's all about behavior, right? The culture, you can say whatever it is you want about the story. If the behaviors are the opposite of what you said your core values were going to be, for instance, well, that's, the teams believe what you do, not what you say. Yeah. And it's true for your customer as well.
So another angle on this I'd love to explore with you for a moment is the phenomena of the imposter syndrome, which is well known. And right, we wrote about it in our book and we've experienced it personally. And I've done a lot of thinking about it. And I think it kind of gets an unfair rap as just a bad thing. If you have the imposter syndrome, you're being hard on yourself. You're feeling that you're not living up to the story that's, there. But I think it's kind of inevitable if we're growing. And I'd love your perspective on this, because if I begin to live a new story in my life, it's not the one I'm familiar with. And it's kind of like the hero's journey. At the beginning of the hero's journey, the hero doesn't feel up to the task. So you could say he might have imposter syndrome. I'm not the hero for this story. But then he grows into it. And by the end of the story, he's fully living it. How do you feel about that? Am I on the right approach there, or do you see it differently?
I love it. It's a new story that you're writing about imposter syndrome, Will. So I love it. I have someone who's suffering from it. I didn't even know I was suffering from it. I thought there was just a way of being. This is like the perpetual learner. I thought that was this. I've never arrived. There's always one more thing to learn, and I felt it was a positive trait as well until I realized it was kind of tripping me up in all kind of weird ways. And so I had to develop a different relationship to this perpetual learner. And I had to recreate the story of, well, no, you've been doing this for 25 years. There's something here that that you can speak and that you can articulate. So I like rewriting it as in a positive way, because it does push us. And it's true that in some way being uncomfortable is a way of knowing you are living a new story that is uncomfortable, but it's challenging you and you are growing. So maybe it's a good sign, that,
Yeah, I like that. That's a good twist. Well, I'm going to remember that one. As you're talking about that, Pauline, too, the other thing that, I start to think about when we're talking about stories is how they impact the relationships we have in our lives. The story of who I am, who I think someone else is, or who I've cast them to be, and maybe a certain role that I've taken on because I think I have to live that role in that relationship. Any insights for you in terms of roles you've taken on and maybe how you've been able to adapt them or change them in order to maybe grow a relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a great story around it, and I'm almost embarrassed to share it because this is a person in a professional setting that came into my life at a point where I felt fairly vulnerable. And the story I projected about this person was that they did not value what I had to offer, and that in fact they were out to get me. And I couldn't quite figure out a way to work with this person. It was kind of hell. And it was particularly difficult for me because I had spent a lifetime with building great relationship in the work. I've never really had that happen. I always find a bridge. Always, this Polizzi, former potential diplomat in me always finds a way to connect with people. So I was really puzzled by it. But I realized this person was a real great teacher for me. And I realized that I was, sitting there one night, just really suffering, going, why do I want this person's approval? Why is it so important to me to have this person's approval when no disrespect, there was nothing particularly about this person that really required me to have this approval. And so I questioned my story about it. And I realized, I haven't given myself the approval that I need. So it sent me on a journey to find that self-love, that self-approval with this person. And it shifted energetically so dramatically that almost overnight, I begin to experience deep respect and gratitude for this person. And it shifted my role. It shifted how I could show up in meetings with this person. It shifted everything in like almost like a 360, actually 180, right? 180 degree in terms of being able to perform and collaborate with this person. So a true teacher, but it took questioning my story about this person, because the truth is we never know what people are really thinking about us. No. We have no idea.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Pauline, that's so informative, and it's so inspiring, really, because I think there's an illusion of some kind of perfection that some other people are experiencing. They're happier than we are. They're more successful than we are. They don't get the negative feelings that we have. And I'd like to go down this road a little more with you, because you made a comment early on about matching the story in a company with the emotional reality. In my life, as I've matured, I've expanded my emotional range. And like many of us, I felt early on that I should be living a Walt Disney life. I should always be happy. I should always be on top of the world. Of course, I wasn't. And I was hiding the parts of it that I didn't approve of. Well, so was everybody else. And once I started opening up, I just had an experience with my wife here this morning where I confessed to her that I was feeling a lot of despair around something. And it still took me something to admit that, because I'm supposed to be an all-together guy, right? Is that really part of my story? And she just kind of almost broke down in tears and said, I love you so much. Now, why would she respond that way? Because I was being authentic. And if you could share a little bit of your experience to just help our listeners relax from the concept that being authentic means you're always perfect. No, it means being honest, right?
Right. I know it reminds me of Brené Brown, of course, and her whole piece around vulnerability and authenticity and how we relate to each other. And this the myth of perfection, right? That we realize it's a protection and a wall that is it precludes you from connecting, and that emotional piece. I think for leaders, you don't have to have all the answers. Absolutely. In fact, you surround yourself with a team that should know more than you do, right? So coming to that place of vulnerability, and like you said so beautifully, just kind of how difficult it is to admit that you don't know everything, that you don't have it together, that there's still pieces of you that just are afraid. And those are all very natural emotion. And in my experience, being able to be vulnerable with my team has allowed them to deal with, one of the big elephant in the room of corporate America and in the world right now, which is mental health. And that perfection trap is killing us, literally. We're all kind of trying to be perfect. And like you said, we're not having the Disney life, and the disconnect is really difficult. It's taking its toll on America. So I have found for myself and my team that for me to admit, yes, I'm seeing a therapist. It's okay to fall apart. It's going to happen. You don't have all the answers. You don't have to have all the answers. It's what Google talks about. It's a psychologically safe organization, that those are the teams that produce the best result because they know they can fail. They know they can be vulnerable. So there's a lot of data around it, but it doesn't make it any easier. it's just kind of like, just try it, dip your toe into vulnerability and opening up, and then see the reaction, and you will be blown away. You might go as far as saving somebody's life because you have opened up about your vulnerability and the difficulties you've dealt with personally. I think the big story that we need, the myth buster around that, is not to get personal professionally. That's the big problem. I think a story that I had where I was like, it's two different things. There's my life and my personal life, and then there's my team and my employees, and I'm not going to be vulnerable because it's two different things. It's not. It's one world, right? So to just get over that, find a way to be vulnerable with your team, and I think you will find that it really will pay off in really beautiful ways. But take it easy, relax.
That's beautiful, Pauline. Well, thanks for the question. Well, that's so important right now. It is, like you talked about, the myth of perfectionism is a story in and of itself that we don't have to adopt. And creating that psychologically safe environment is so valuable in organizations. We are, believe it or not, out of time. This has been fantastic, Pauline. Thank you so much for joining us. And what a wonderful conversation. I'm walking away with some really great insights. So thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. And, we'll have to do this again.
Yes, let's do it. I just adore the two of you, and I'm looking forward to listening to more from the two of you.
Thank you
Great
so
stories
much.
today.
Yeah, thank you. And again, signing off, I'm Christopher Harding.
And I'm Will Wilkinson. This is the Thriving Leadership Academy, presenting the first in our second series of podcasts. Thanks for joining us.